Pro-life women of Reddit. Why? Just commenting to say the serious tag may be a good choice. I'm not sure if you can add tags after the fact, but if you ever try asking something like this again, the serious tag is useful. For most of my life I considered myself to be pro-life, and I couldn't understand why on earth anyone could consider being pro-choice. I constantly equated being pro-choice to being pro-abortion and knew I never wanted to consider that option for myself or anyone. But when I turned 17, everything changed. Less than a week after my 17th birthday, I was raped by an ex-boyfriend and I was pregnant. Living with two abusive parents and the fact that I was being stalked by my ex-boyfriend and was being threatened by him. I was terrified. I was a baby having a baby, and I knew both of our lives were in danger. I knew that something was going to happen and that it was up to me. In my head I briefly thought of abortion as an option to spare my child from being abused like I was. But then I realized that I would never be able to live with myself no matter what happened if I did that. So I made the choice to keep the child. I was going to go through the pregnancy and give her or him up for adoption so they could have a better life. Unfortunately, I didn't get to keep the child because due to no prenatal care and an unknown medical condition, I miscarried and almost died in my bathroom at 10 weeks. But after all the heartache and trauma of it happening, I realized that it was still a choice and I made mine. When you're a parent or a human being, you have to make the best decisions for you and all around you, and I did that. Regardless of my miscarriage, it was still in my mind the right thing to do. I will stand by my decision, but knowing how hard and heartbreaking that experience was, I will never judge another person going through that. And that is why I think other pro-life advocates don't understand why having a choice is so important. They've never been in a situation where they've never needed choices, and at the end of the day they never will understand unless they have. Pro-choice does not have to mean pro-abortion. It simply means to offer help in any way possible to people in terrible situations. And hopefully something good will come out of this, and there will come a time where no one has to make the terrible choice again. My family member, who is religious and has multiple kids and no serious complications with any of them, thinks that life begins at conception and that every child is beautiful and should be respected from before birth. I'm not going to pick that apart or anything, just relaying what she thinks. My family member, who is my elder, is deeply Catholic and vehemently pro-life. She is a mother of two. She recently confessed to me that she had 2 abortions after her second child was born. She was married, financially stable, and already a mother, but her husband worried they couldn't afford another child. 6 months later, she had her second abortion, same circumstances. They were saved from further abortions by a hysterectomy 6 months after that. She says she wishes she hadn't had to do it, but is glad that she could give a better life to her 2 boys and grieves it but doesn't regret it. She is extremely active in pro-life circles. She is extremely active in the church. She is a local bigwig in the GOP. I don't know why she wishes to deny other women the rights that she had, and exercised, when she was of childbearing age. I suspect there are many secret abortions hidden amongst the pro-life set. I have an aunt who is pretty right politically, but her sister is even further right. One of the secrets that isn't known outside of the family is my aunt's sister had 2 abortions back in the late 70s. Those experiences shaped how they feel about certain issues though. My aunt is absolutely pro-choice, even loving a Facebook post my cousin, her daughter, made today about the BS in Texas. Her sister is the same way when it comes to abortion. What people who are right politically and vehemently pro-life don't understand is abortions to nearly everyone who has ever had one isn't a badge of honor. It's not shameful for most, but it isn't their proudest moment and something they don't want to revisit. They also aren't being performed on women who are left. It's women of all political beliefs. When I was in college, I went to a pretty conservative Bible study group. I didn't have a lot in common with most of the other members, but I went there because I learned a lot. Anyway, one evening, a young man who probably had Asperger's, and was not high-functioning, said, when we got to the prayer request time, said, "We've got to pray about these abortion laws." The pastor said, "If you want to pray about abortion laws on your own time, that's fine, but we aren't here to discuss political or social issues, we're just here to study the Bible." He added, "People who come here have many different views about abortion, and there may be women in this room right now who have had an abortion that was not medically necessary, and believe she did the right thing. Good man." Truly pro-life. She is a lovely and loving woman in so many ways. She is also a master at cognitive dissonance. The other glaring example is how frothingly anti-immigration she is. This blows my mind. Her husband was an illegal, her words, until she forced him to pursue citizenship as a condition of marriage. He had been in the country since age 5, would hide from ins when they raided the neighborhood, and his mother never bothered to learn English. Once he had citizenship, he used chain migration to get his dad, brothers, great-aunts, cousins, etc. to the States. Yet she actively works to hinder other people's access to the benefits that her husband so enjoys. He is also vehemently anti-immigration. Nuts. I'm a pro-life, Christian woman. I don't think anyone should get an abortion, but the amount of energy pro-life organizations pour into vilifying abortion seems like a waste of time and effort to me. If we really want to help women in difficult situations, we would focus on providing the resources and support needed for women to feel they can keep their babies. Stop trying to convert people and just offer a helping hand where it's needed most. These women need medical coverage, rent assistance, parenting classes, childcare, and so much more, not just platitudes that every life is sacred and cast-off baby clothes. Real sex education for kids should be provided as well, not that abstinence BS. And don't just focus on the women, the guys involved need to step up. Stop touting signs with broken baby parts and actually be there for the mother in her most vulnerable hour, without judgment. Edit. Guys, thank you so much for the kind words, from people on both sides of the issue. I'll try to reply to as many of you as I can, but there are a lot of you, and I'm trying to be thoughtful and clear with my responses and answer questions to the best of my ability. Plus I have work tomorrow and have to go to bed soon, so it will take some time. To those who found issue with what I've said here, thank you for posting your thoughts. It really gives me things to consider, hearing your opposing viewpoints, a few of which never came to mind before. I might do another edit to address some points people brought up, we'll see. And especially thank you to the women who have shared their abortion experiences with me. I know that can be a difficult thing to talk about, and I hear what you have had to say, and I see you, and I care, whether we agree at the end or not. You are all strong and fierce, and I wish you the best in life. That's probably because it's the exact same as us. Let's be serious. Of course abortions are bad. They're taxing emotionally, physically and monetarily. They're terrible events in people's lives. There's very little good to it. It's a shitty thing in a shitty situation that would have been shittier. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Just the toll it takes on your body alone is horrendous. But anyone who is actually reasonable and informed realizes that to actually stop abortions, we already know the solutions, and when those solutions are taken, we can infer that it was never about that. They as much as tell us directly that it isn't about babies or murder or the Bible, it's about subjugation and punishment and cruelty. Edit. Why the fuck are you all assuming I'm a pro-lifer or somehow for outlawing abortions? What the fuck? I'm saying the preferable route is to not need abortions that isn't realistic because birth control costs money and men love to pretend the condom slipped off because they hate the feel of it. Of course you fight for access to them. I never said otherwise. I said all of this to illustrate exactly how hypocritical the entire fight against abortion is. How is this not obvious in context? Facts. If they want abortion rates to decline, they need to teach safe sex practices, not whatever abstinence bullshit they think is fooling people, and to make BC widely available. But they're not going to do that. The organizations that villainize abortions and call the people who have them baby killers regardless of their reason for it. Not everyone who gets an abortion is a dumbass teen who didn't use protection. Don't give a flying fuck about the fetus. They're just punishing women for having sex. If they actually cared, they would have better sex ed, make birth control easily accessible, provide tools for expecting mothers who don't have the best means or situation for having a child at that point in time. They would remedy many of the situations that lead to women needing abortions. But they don't, because it's not about the fetus and it never has been. All outlawing abortions does is increase the number of illegal abortions and increases the amount of back alley coat hanger abortions that are more likely to do long-term physical damage to the woman having it done. If you want to lower abortions, you teach people comprehensive safe sex, make contraceptives widely available, and put the man in a position of liability to father any potential child. Horny people will always have sex, but if you teach them right, they will have sex in a way that has much less chance of leading to unwanted children. the less likely people are to get pregnant, the less abortions there are. If you really cared about young children, you would also support more comprehensive assistance for pregnant women and mothers of children. Easier access to affordable health care, additional maternity leave rights, affordable childcare options, more social benefits for new mothers, and so on. Anything that prevents children from being abandoned or growing up with not enough money to cover all the costs of raising a child, and prevents mothers of children from going into absolute poverty. If all you care about is preventing abortions, but don't want for any of the rest of this, you're not really pro-life, you just want to punish women for having sex. This will depend on how that law is written. The medical term abortion refers to the ending of the pregnancy, by expulsion of the products of pregnancy, before the baby is viable. After its stillbirth, the medical term does not differentiate if the baby has already passed away or not. A miscarriage can also be referred to as spontaneous abortion. With a missed miscarriage abortion or incomplete miscarriage abortion, you still get the exact same medication or procedure. Medically, it's still an induced or surgical abortion because the body did not expel the baby, placenta etc., the procedure did. Savita Harlapanavar is a well-known case where DR, out of fear for their license, didn't perform an abortion. Initially because there was still a faint heartbeat, but she was already developing sepsis and she passed away. Depending on how the law is written, that could start happening in the Texas as well. Not to mention what would happen with ectopic pregnancies where the embryo fetus is still very much alive. Symptoms start between 4 and 12 weeks, so could be after the 6-week cutoff, or with very early cases of preeclampsia and the baby passes away due to premature induction, could the DRN mom face consequences. A lot of abortions can definitely be prevented with the appropriate social support, but some still won't be. Aside from the rape and incest ones, there are ones like mine. I got an abortion simply because I didn't want to have a kid. The popular stereotype is a slutty younger girl who sleeps around, but I had an abortion at 25 because my husband and I decided it wasn't a good time for a kid. A DR birth control failed. Since then I've had one child and am currently pregnant with the second. After the maternal quad screen I had done at 16 weeks, there was a chance I would get another abortion, this time a second trimester one. Luckily the birth defect possibility that turned up in the blood screen was ruled out by ultrasound, but if my baby would have had that specific defect, I absolutely would have aborted. Assuming my baby would have made it to term, it would have only known a very short insufferable time outside of my body, and that is not the world I wanted it to know. Late-term abortions are always wanted babies. The law does not discriminate on why an abortion is being procured. To ban abortion would force mothers to carry dead or dying babies who were very much wanted and do untold psychological damage to the mother. I agree with most of these points. I definitely think we need to focus on men and women with regard to education. But I still think abortion should be accessible. I feel we can drastically reduce the overall number by providing comprehensive sexual education, as well as birth control and contraception, and we need to work as a society to reduce the stigma of providing those things. We need to find ways to help those in ways you mentioned so that they have something other than panic with regard to having a baby. People need to step up their game when it comes to help, instead of shaming parents that don't want to have a child at that moment, giving themselves that puffed chest feeling of moral superiority. But it needs to remain accessible. If a mother cannot or does not want to carry and give birth, it has to be her choice, since she's the one that wants to go through it, and we can't make her not doing just because other people don't like it. We can offer, not require, information and assistance, but if she says no, it has to mean no. Making abortion illegal will not eliminate it, only make it more dangerous. As a kid and teenager growing up in church and going to Christian school, there was a whole narrative around the abortion issue that I was fed. There were pro-life banquets. I was given books where pro-lifers were touted as heroes for holding protests outside abortion clinics. Purity culture was heavy. As I read and learned and experienced more, I realized that the whole thing wasn't preventing abortion, it was driving women away in droves, fleeing judgment and hate. It really came to a head when I was doing a speech on abortion in college and was researching CareNet, and there was this whole video on there where this man talks about how abortion is bad because the Bible, and I thought, but how is this helping, though? How many times are you going to repeat abortion is bad to women who need support? A lot of the pro-life movement is based on Christian ideals and not the reality these women are facing. But many pro-life people grew up the same way I did and never did their own research or introspection, so they're just spouting these same tired phrases over and over. I really love what you said about providing resources and education to prevent abortions before they even become possibilities. I'm not sure my beliefs align with yours on what to do when unwanted pregnancies inevitably happen, even if all of those wonderful things were in place, but I agree that prevention is our best tool. But I have so many questions. I hope you take them as good faith questions. It is very difficult to write questions on such a delicate topic without coming across as too blunt. I hope you were able to read the words for what they are and not read any unintended accusations into them. How familiar are you with the abortion process? I mean in terms of the pre-abortion counseling and the procedure itself? Wondering if you believe that women should have the option to have an abortion if that is what they really want? Like, do you think that nobody should even have that option? Or do you think that the option should be there even though you would prefer people not to use it? I ask because you very respectfully told other commenters that you respect their decision even if you don't agree with or understand it, but I'm not sure where you stand on this. If you do believe that the option should be there, why? Is it for safety? Do you believe that you would rather the mother survive in a medical setting rather than both the mother and fetus die in a back alley abortion, assuming fetal demise is unpreventable in this scenario? If you don't believe the option should be there, how do you reconcile the fact that women will still have abortions that are much more dangerous than those that are provided in a medical setting? Do you think that all people should have a Christian belief system imposed upon them even if they don't follow the same faith as you? If so, why do you feel that way? What if someone faithfully follows another religion that permits abortions? Or do you more believe that abortion is not right for you personally, but that other people should be able to make the decisions they feel are right for themselves? Do you believe in separation of church and state? How do you feel about abortion restriction laws that are based on only one faith or set of related faiths, usually Christianity in the United States? Have you ever tried to talk someone experiencing an unwanted pregnancy out of abortion? If so, how did that make you feel? Are there things that you would handle differently if confronted with that situation again? I read your response regarding rape. I'm sorry you had the experience you did. I have been raped and pregnancy was a major concern for me. Some children become pregnant by rape quite young. If a 12-year-old presented to you with an unwanted pregnancy that would almost certainly kill her if carried to term, would you advocate that she risk her life for the product of a rape and provide her with resources on parenting? Do you think you would feel differently if that 12-year-old who would probably pass were your daughter? You've mentioned several times that you are not opposed to chemical interference with fertility such as morning after pill and contraceptive pills. I'm curious as to your thoughts on why you think it is okay to abandon Christian principles in those cases but not in others, such as the case of abortion? Is it because you view abortion as more morally clear-cut or more violent? I'm just curious where the line is. Do you think that surgical alterations to one's body, vasectomy, tubal ligation, that are permanent forms of contraception are acceptable? If not, how is that any different than someone using birth control for the entirety of their reproductive years? Mifepristone and misoprostol are a combination of drugs that are chemical abortificants that can be used in early pregnancy. Are you opposed to their use? If so, what do you think is the moral difference between using them and say an IUD which doesn't prevent the fertilization of an egg but interrupts the pregnancy after? You seem to feel quite strongly about this issue, especially as it relates to preventing pregnancies and providing resources after pregnancy. What do you personally do in your day-to-day life to support these goals, other than your intention to hopefully one day foster adopt? And I guess my very last set of questions is regarding why you are anti-abortion at all? Is it due to your upbringing that you described in another comment? Do you think you would have different beliefs if you grew up in a different environment, or do you think you would have come to the same conclusion regardless? If you think you would have arrived at the same conclusion, what makes you feel that way? I realize you are not going to answer all or probably any of these questions, but it would be extremely appreciated any time that you could put toward this. With thanks. The debate is about what is it. If the embryo is not a human being, then it's like a fingernail or a kidney, do what you want with it. No justification is needed for killing it. But if it is a human being, you can't just kill it because it suits you. Pro-choice people assume that it's not a human being. Pro-life people assume that it is. No meeting ground is possible, hence the collision. Kaboom. I personally think, scientifically, life starts at conception. People argue when life starts, 8 weeks after conception, 12 weeks, when the heart beats, brain activity, etc. But that then becomes subjective, right? They decide where along that line it becomes a viable life? To me, science would be black and white on this issue. Take faith and political arguments out, and say the only obvious answer when it's conceived and not my notions of when I view it as a baby. If uninterrupted, the life starts at fertilization. The abortion argument then becomes who can choose if that life can be the woman's choice to end or is the life righted life once it's conceived? Lots of faith-based people, agree or disagree, think God planned that child in their mother's womb and that it should have protections. They want to be the baby's voice since the baby has no defense against their mother's choice to end their life. To them it's not about government telling a woman what to do with their body but becomes a life and death fight for the rights of the unborn child. I personally had an abortion as a young 23 years old woman. I'm 39 and never had a biological child of my own but have raised 2 girls since they were babies. I would never have another abortion. I feel I was wrong. I regret that decision and wish I had not. Can I tell another woman what to do and should it be illegal? My heart wants to say that baby should have the right to live but my head says that's not my decision to make. I honestly don't know. I'm personally now pro-life for myself but tentatively pro-choice for women. It does make my heart hurt either way. Not an easy answer. Like Uriah Joy 247 said earlier, this is me. Pro-life, Christian. I've had 5 kids, would love another, husband says no, and can't even really think about abortion in any real way, as it is horrific to think about those babies. But standing behind rhetoric and not even considering the rare cases where the baby literally isn't viable, or won't even make it to term, or where the mother has a literal life-threatening situation. That's the first issue. Like, seriously? This is what the right does again and again. They want all or nothing. They fail to even provide concessions and logic for other possibilities. Add to that this would be giving the government one more piece of control over the individual, as much as I believe that is a little person in there, is ultra scary, and should be avoided at all costs. The only way to cut down abortion rates is education. Start improving countrywide education and easier access to contraceptives. Make education more accessible. The amount of money that goes into education in this country is laughable. And sure, abstinence is the only 100% way to avoid pregnancy, but can you even fathom the fact that kids might just do it anyway? The fact that religion can enter into education is abhorrent, and I am a Christian. I've tried using the what if the religion they were using to make decisions was Islam. Atheism, argument with those who still want prayer in schools, etc., but I always get the look like that would never happen. I do remember being young and thinking I may be pregnant, before I was married, and the absolute panic I felt, the sinking feeling, the horror. It isn't my right to take that option away from anyone, as much as I hate it. If you really care about the babies, help with education. Help poor mothers who can't afford food instead of telling them they are lazy or stealing if they get welfare. Or food stamps. Or WIC. 2 of which I have depended on when our financial stability, once not a question, disappeared seemingly overnight and didn't come back for 6 long years. I didn't judge people before then, and I sure as hell won't now, but the amount of vitriol I see and hear towards these programs, not to mention the misinformation. Sorry, sidetracked. But yeah, I very much consider myself pro-life, but I also don't believe in taking away the choice instead of trying to fix the issue so far down the line. Why can't we work on solving the underlying causes? Like, this is common sense. And, since my statements just made me sound pro-choice, to add more to my inconsistencies, I also am not against the death penalty. I think it should be rare, and only used with incontrovertible evidence. I actually hate the idea of it, but to make it personal, if someone did something terrible to my children or a loved one, or actually children in general, why are we using tax dollars to keep them alive? But I also am against most drug incarcerations. I don't think there should be many absolutes in just about anything, and I also think the less control the government is over us individually, the better. Molly physician weighing in on Molly contraception. Got opinions on abortion, but the thread was pretty clear about the perspective it's seeking. Vasectomies, while not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, are not that invasive. They're definitely cheaper than raising a child. They're also way less invasive than female surgical contraception. There's a reason we do vasectomies in the clinic under local anesthetic but do tubal salpingectomies in the OR. I'd argue they're also less invasive than surgical abortion. And yes, after years of my better half doing hormonal contraception, I'm now on the docket to put my money where my mouth is, egg my balls, and get snipped. My great-aunt was an ER nurse in New York City in the 40s and 50s, and her husband was a mortician during that time. Apparently how they met. They saw some serious shit during their careers before they moved to rural New York for a quieter life. She was also a die-hard Catholic until the day she died. She, and he to some extent, were both pro-life all the way. I remember her saying to me, if you saw what I saw, you'd want it to be illegal too. From what I was told, she apparently had seen a full-term baby's butchered body thrown in the hospital dumpster by back-alley abortionist. Her words, he apparently had to repair women's bodies that died during botched abortions. Of course this wasn't the entirety of their careers, but the illegal abortion stuck out in their minds even into their old ages. Since they were my great-aunt and uncle, they were old and retired by the time I could really have conversations with them. I never debated them on their beliefs, but it was my understanding they couldn't fathom something like what they saw and experienced ever being legal. I myself don't agree with abortion. I would never get an abortion unless there was an extreme reason to do so. With that said, I do not agree with it being banned. There are sometimes situations where it needs to happen. Pregnancy that has come from rape, pregnancy that poses a serious risk to the mother. Pregnancy that was an accident even though the couple were taking all precautions. Not to mention, some people just aren't ready. Forcing them to have a baby they don't want isn't going to go well. Do they keep a child they don't want who they might not be able to support? Will the child grow up being resented? Not every unwanted child will be able to be adopted, unfortunately. We do better to give better sex education and make contraception more easily available to avoid the need for an abortion in the first place. I'm not a woman nor am I pro-life. But my sister was pro-life and we've talked about it a lot. She's changed her view as of today, but having good faith discussions with her helped me understand why people like her are pro-life. Religion. We all know this one. Over time she realized that being pro-choice and being Christian weren't incompatible. She believed that unborn fetuses were babies. If you saw people walking around taking babies out of strollers and murdering them, you'd have a strong reaction as well. Despite this being something I deeply disagree with, I can understand the power of this emotional reaction. Her view on this softened over time, but she's still pretty conservative on when and if pregnancy abortions should no longer be an option, except if it puts the mother's life at risk. I also think having a better understanding of how painful of a decision it is for women to get an abortion was eye-opening for her. She had been propagandized to think liberals just don't give a shit and want to have abortions whenever. She was a teenage mother. She had an attitude like, I went through this, and it was really hard, but other people can, too. We were poor growing up, had an unstable home life, and she managed to pull her shit together in a way that's truly incredible. My siblings and I supported her and each other, and she's one of the strongest people I know. For her, it really came down to having more experience understanding how other people face a lot more barriers than her, even though our lives weren't easy, that our social service systems suck, and that some people would be faced with abject poverty if they were forced to have a baby. I'm between pro-life and pro-choice. I'm Catholic, and I consider the embryo a human being, or rather a pre-human. Ask a woman who's pregnant by choice if it's a person or a bundle of cells, and I think you can guess what she'll answer. She probably has a name picked out already, and is buying baby clothes and furniture. I hate the atheist viewpoint of it's just a tiny clumps of cells and doesn't matter. Bullshit. That being said, I've heard too many stories of rape victims, pregnant children, and people who just aren't ready for a baby. I wonder what happens to a 12-year-old girl who gets RP'd by stepdaddy and then has to carry the baby. What kind of life does she have if she has no rights at all? A shit life, that's what. And what about the baby? Would you want to be born unwanted? I personally would rather die, and go back to wherever I came from. So I chose what I think would work best. Abortion should be legal, period. Sex education should be widely taught. It's the only way things are going to change. Not totalitarian rule. I believe, at the very core, true pro-life and true pro-choice have the same goal, and even similar approaches. But then you have extremists that can only be matched with extremists of opposing views, and it all just becomes noise. Studies consistently show access to birth control and comprehensive sex ed leads to fewer abortions and fewer pregnancies altogether. Anyone who has sex should receive the same education and should understand it. It seems now to have mutated into pro-control and pro-birth versus pro-abortion. I've yet to meet someone that becomes pregnant for the sole purpose of having an abortion. I believe, however, taking away that choice or trying to limit circumstances does far more harm than good. Technically, I'm pro-life, but more antinatalist than I am pro-abortion. I think life is precious and starts at conception. However, I also think that a good majority of people shouldn't be having kids for various reasons, but mainly because they'd suck at it. So, while I wouldn't have an abortion and wish women had more realistic options, I wouldn't necessarily call women who had abortions especially evil. I think people who villainize women for this are more interested in oppressing, controlling women than they are for the life inside her. I consider myself pro-life, but I don't believe making abortion illegal is the answer. I understand there are situations where an abortion might be necessary. I also understand some people feel they have no other choice but to have an abortion. I believe the problem choice politicians have not given women a real choice because they don't pass social safety nets for parents. I believe we should have campus housing for parents, daycare available at no cost on college campuses, free healthcare for mothers and children. Actually, I think we should have universal healthcare for all. Expanded food and housing programs to people with children and paid maternity leave and expanded protections for parents who need to take off work for childbirth and childcare. Pro-life people would not consider me pro-life because they are pro-punish the mom and pro-fetus. They are not pro-life. Life doesn't end at birth like they believe. I personally would never ever get an abortion and would be very sad if someone I cared about had one, but I don't think it should be illegal. So I'm pro-life by some standards, pro-choice by others. But here's the thing. Prohibiting supply of a product or service without reducing demand for it results in, black market for it, inability to regulate safety for it, it being most easily accessible to the rich. Poor people try DIY versions. See the war on drugs, prohibition, etc. So if we want to reduce abortions, we have to reduce demand, not ban supply. How do we do that? Less people getting pregnant in the first place. And in order to abusive that, the best tools we have are education and free accessible contraception, ways people can have sex and not get pregnant. Arg. The conservatives are against those though. Drives me crazy. I'm a pro-life, moderately liberal, atheist woman. Back in 2004, my twin cousins were born 16 weeks premature. At that time, their survival was unlikely because we didn't have the medical advancements we do today. Still, they pushed through and both of them not only survived, but they are now 17 and thriving. I can't imagine my life without them. My aunt could have chosen to get an abortion at that time, but she didn't. She chose to at least give them a fighting chance, and they fought hard. The fact that she could have taken away their lives at a moment they were born and made it out alive just really bothers me. I won't get into a discussion on first trimester abortions because I think there's definitely a gray area, and to be completely honest, I don't know what I would do if I was in that situation. I've never had to make that choice. However, if there's even a super slim, almost zero, possibility of viable life if the baby were to be born at that moment, it really upsets me to think that they could be denied the chance. I'm not looking to get into an argument or a big political discussion. You won't change my mind, and I won't change yours, but this is why I'm pro-life and always will be.